Well, I can see that with the slugs. Slugs are blue bloods, right? And crabs and certain animals are blue bloods. So it's interesting when you start putting copper in your soil, the slugs all go away. They don't want to come and clean up the iron anymore. That's all being placed into it. So that's an interesting one with them. There was a guy who talked about that, who studied Victor Schauberger, and he explained how the iron oxides are going into the soil, and then the slugs are going to pile up. And once you start placing copper in there, like, okay, the soil's good. I don't need to go there anymore, and then they go somewhere else.
Oh, so okay, that's interesting. So basically, yeah, because we've got to look at this as a system, right? And so slugs and snails, we may hate them and think, oh, they're eating our plants, but actually they're there for a reason. It's just that everything's out of balance, and so they're eating everything, right? That's interesting.
That's very interesting, considering what you use as slug bait to get rid of slugs on your, like, if you're doing an outdoor and you have a bunch of plants that they're eating. Well, use copper sulfate, and they hate it.
Yeah,
they turn around from it immediately. So that's interesting.
Copper usually kills snails too, right? Like in fish tanks and whatnot.
That's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is with that too is I noticed with a lot of people, because a lot of people always say, you know, I got bugs eating up my plants, you know, and whatever. Number one, the plants could be healthy and they're eating them. But I've started to realize that, like you just said, the bugs are only coming around to clean everything up, right? They're trying to fix what, for example, let's say we are messing up. And that's why they're there, to clean all that, you know, the plant that's already emitting frequencies. And Philip Callahan had a great book on this, and I can't remember the name of it, but he basically described that plants will start emitting a UV frequency or an infrared frequency that the plant is now falling apart, and then the insects will actually see that frequency, and then they will come and try to clean up that plant based on the color spectrum that plant is emitting.
Yep. I definitely resonate with that. That's awesome.
So basically, if we have healthy plants, we shouldn't have, you know, pests or, you know, any of these things hanging around, because they're literally there trying to fix things, but we're looking at them as the problem, and then we're killing them with all this stuff, which is more chemicals, which is making the problem worse. It's crazy.
And then
you keep feedback loops.
I was just going to say, you keep damaging, and then they keep coming back. And then when let's say like there's some ants, right, and you smush them, right, let's say you smush them, now it releases a pheromone, which brings additional ants, right, more frequency.
Yep.
And then you just keep going through this perpetual cycle, and then you can't figure out why, for example, the bugs have taken over your land, and then your land is so destroyed. So what do? Which we see now with our traditional farming practices, move to the next acre and keep just going to the next one and destroying that one and going through these cycles, you know, and it's just, it's nuts. It doesn't make any sense, and we don't need to do any of
that. Matt, have you ever worked with rock dust?
Yes, the basalt. Yes.
Yeah. Putting it in and turning it into the soil, it seems to help bring the soil back a lot quicker.
Yes. So what basalt is that volcanic ash that comes out from the volcanoes, and it has lots and lots of quartz. So, like, for example, like this is crypto quartz. It's the bloodstone, right? It's pure quartz, and the quartz in here, when it's squeezed, right? So when I squeeze it like that, it creates that piezoelectric effect. So when you take, for example, basalt, if this was basalt or volcanic clay or quartz dust, as somebody just said, and you place that into your soil, as the earth is compressing that, right, as it's kind of pulling it down, and the water and all those things are happening, then what's happening is creating that piezoelectric effect on the soil, and then amplifying the energy, and then also providing the body, or not providing the body, but providing the plant with lots of quartz, lots of silica, lots of beautiful rare earth metals, right? We use them in all these devices, but they're also put in food. And then there's a lot of monatomics in the as well, which can be very healing as well too.
Right, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to ask if you've looked into that or applied that.
I have a theory for that.
Myself, I've last year I used some monoatomic gold on a lettuce plant outside, and it grew to 6 feet tall. And I showed that in a couple of videos, and just nuts. So, and I've seen lots of other people using this Ormus, the monoatomics alone, and that increases 2 to 3x the yields in the just vegetables, plants in general too. So that if you're then connecting electroculture with monoatomics and then the structured water, that we could be looking at 5 to 10x yields within like just a couple years time, and real abundance again.
I mean, I could totally see that. And with the Ormus, you're putting it into a certain state. You're turning it almost into a colloidal state. So it's very easy to absorb because you transmuted it through fire, right? We used to take things, burn them, turn them into ashes, and then pour them all over our plants. So your monatomics they've gone through the same process. They're hit at a super high heat. They go into a different realm, as they say, kind of come back. And then once they're back, they're put into a liquid, which is now a colloidal liquid or a monatomic liquid. And then you place that onto your plants and they'll absorb it instantaneously. And a lot of those monatomic elements are all conductive elements, which are needed for the plant to function or for our brain to function.
Yes.
So the more you turn on that conductivity, like you just said, the more you're going to have. And there was one video I saw a long time ago with this guy. He started with like a vine plant, and it was just like a little vine inside of his house. And the vine took over his whole entire house when he started doing all these different practices. And he won the world record, or Guinness World Record, for the largest vine, because the average vine was like 8 feet, basically. His grew to 2,000 feet.
Whoa.
Wow.
So
see, and my theory with monatomic elements, them being in the plant, we used all these different aspects, electroculture, structured water, you name it. The amount of monatomics in the plants that would be for our bodies would be absolutely astounding, because we don't get that now. Our soils are stripped of most of the elements, and like that's why I brought up rock dust to begin with, because our soils are pretty much dead, or getting that way. So yeah, that's awesome.
And so, of course, if we do this, the plants that we grow are going to have more of what we need, right? So that by default, we get healthier by making them healthier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing we're missing. Like the more I got into nutrition and healing, energy frequencies, energy healing, all of that, it's all your cells are just not conducting, right? Your body is just not sending electric to the rest of the body.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're missing those vital nutrients to create electricity and amplify your aura, your essence, your energy, which is also amplified during the full moon. So a lot of people have a lot of, such stuff that goes with the brain during the full moon because the energy is so amplified. So if you have nutritional imbalances, those are amplified as well during the full moon. So when we start addressing electroculture and we start doing all these things for our soil and start bringing those things back, even like the basalt and the rock dust and these things, now you're addressing those mineral deficiencies that you didn't even know you had, right? And when I started getting into a lot of different, for example, superfoods, if you look at the materials that are in them, a lot of the people would say you shouldn't eat that, right? That's not what's supposed to go into the body. But then you look at the cultures who've been eating these things from these soils and these plants, and you see how healthy they are, then somebody's lying, right? That's kind of
yeah. Well, it's interesting. Kids love to eat soil, don't they? They'll literally just eat the soil.
There's pictures of me as a 2-year-old eating soil, so straight up, good point. And so for Gurin, thank you for $10 Australian to me, and I'll also put $10 Australian on Campbell's channel. Greatly appreciate the support.
We do. And yeah, because I was listening to someone the other day, and they were talking about health, and basically saying that the problem is the inhibitors is that we can't uptake certain things. So, you go to doctors and they're like, "Oh, take these vitamins, take these pills, and do all this stuff." But if you can't uptake that into your body, it's a waste of time and money, right? So we need to work more on getting
Right.
the inhibitor's gone, and so we can actually use everything that's coming into the
like
body.
the sick plants and the bugs coming for them, your body and your immune system. And when you're a healthy immune system, you never have to worry about anything, any bugs, anything like that. And you take the chemicals, the pharmaceuticals, you're doing more damage, getting yourself more out of equilibrium, out of your field, your energies, everything out of balance, and your problems get worse.
Pretty much.
Well, it's interesting that we call like viruses and little things, viruses, bugs, right? Oh, I just caught a bug.
Yep.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, Matt, have you noticed a big difference eating Electro-Culture gardens in comparison to, say, store-bought produce?
You'll notice a big difference in the taste and the energy. Yeah, you don't need as much. You'll notice a big difference in the taste. I got a bunch of cayennes, which are growing I get cayennes every 4 days, and it's not even the season. It's still 70 and 60 degrees outside. It's not even hot, but the bees just keep coming. They just keep, whatever. And with that, the spiciness too, it's a lot more alive, right? And as Campbell was saying, like a lot of the stuff with the utensils and our plates and our cups, right? Like we used to drink from copper cups, right? We used to drink from brass cups, silver cups. We used to use a lot of stones, a lot of stoneware, a lot of different materials that were derived from certain things. Those would also amplify the energy or not change the energy of the food, right? Because like you could go and get food from your garden, take it inside, cut it, right? And now you just diminished the life force of it using, for example, the iron or the steel and whatever. Versus back in the day, they used to pick, for example, basil. And I've seen this happen, and this is why I say this. You can go and pick basil with your hands, and you can pull it apart, and you'll notice that it'll pretty much just stay in the same composition, and you'll start to move, right? But if you take a knife and you actually cut it, you'll start to see it almost wilt. And you can see it with basil. It's one of the few plants I think you can see it with. But think about that on the energy spectrum, right? If you're growing all this beautiful stuff and then you now diminish the energy as soon as you bring it in the home, right? Then the flavor's going to change. Things are going to change. All these things. And as somebody just said, eating with the fingers was the original way. You look at a lot of people in different places, they ate with their hands. Right? That's all about it. Why? Because their hands are the neutral frequency. And then depending on whatever jewelry they were wearing at that same time, right? Let's say copper or whatever it may be, that also is helping the energy of that food while they're eating it at the same time. So it's all that energetic principle part that we just kind of have forgotten because we think, it's just food. And if we lost in touch with energy, like you were saying, the nutrition is not going to be the same. The nutrients, the flavor, the everything, the love that's being poured in there is not going to be the same. And it was interesting because when I was looking at all this research, there was a guy who talked about how plants can read your mind, right? Marcel Vogel talked about how plants can read your mind. So if you're about to cause harm to them, they're actually going to get and kind of like not release a toxin, but they're going to get into a scared state. And then they're going to pull the nutrients out just before they give them to you, right? Before you go to take it. So everything is very alive and conscious, much more than we're aware of. And yeah, I've noticed just a taste, flavor, spice, all these things that are supposed to be tasted on the taste buds, right? Those things have all been turned off.
That's awesome. Clive Barkley did well.
Sorry, you go.
No, you go ahead. I know there's a delay, so sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, have you found or noticed that you need to eat less of this food because it's more nutrient dense? Because we're in a society where people are just overeating it, but it's because what they're eating isn't satisfying them, right? It's not giving them what they need, so they try and take in more. So because these are more nutrient rich or whatever we want to say, do you find that you need less of that food?
I could say that can be true on multiple levels. It's the same thing with water as well too, right? You have structured
exactly.
water. You don't need as much of it because it's hydrated.
You can absorb it. Yeah.
So same with the food. If the food didn't, let's just make an easy scenario. travel 2,000 miles to a grocery store, sit underneath lights that are cooking it with radiation